In this video, I want to answer the question, how did change accelerate? And as usual, before we get into answering the question, I want to be sure that we're on the same page with what the question's even asking. So, what is change? In this case, change is a significant innovation or invention that changed how humans live. So, for example, a change could be agriculture. A change could be a social structure, like civilizations. A change could be electricity, cars, computers, the Industrial Revolution, gunpowder. These are all changes that upturned how humanity lives. And, of course, accelerate, well, this is implying that change has been going faster, and indeed, you see agriculture. Thousands of years pass. Okay, you're having some civilizations happening. Thousands of years pass. And trade, you have now some empires. You have governments, okay, hundreds of years. Now you have gunpowder. You're starting to see a huge wave of changes now. You have electricity. You have huge advances in physics and science that lead to medicine and to healthcare and to global organization, countries, and soon you have cars and a huge surge of new innovation that happens. And I have a quote here by David Christian, who inspired big history. He was the first to think about big history. He said that more change has occurred in the 20th century than in all earlier periods of human history. This is really amazing, considering that all earlier periods of human history, it consists of 100,000 years, whereas the 20th century consists of 100 years. So it's really amazing to think that change has accelerated so much that this statement is probably true. We've had an incredible amount that has happened in the past 100 years compared to even everything that's happened before that. And now the question is why? How did change accelerate? What were the mechanisms? And to get to this, I want to talk about something that humans have done for a really long time. Humans like to offload work. And what do I mean by this? Well, in one example, you could say, okay, instead of foraging, so instead of finding maybe a couple of trees every so often and a bush with some food, digging up roots, and walking quite a bit between them to get to that, we said, hey, what if we concentrate where all of our food is so we can start living sedentary lifestyles and get the division of labor and grow all of our food in a nice place so that every year you get a nice harvest with all of your food. And additionally, instead of putting in the work for you to walk around and gather it all up, now you're employing almost these little mini solar panels that are all taking the sun's energy and converting it to energy that humans can use. So this was a huge example of offloading work. Another big example of offloading work was when we started using oxen to plow fields, for example. Instead of plowing it by hand, we said, hey, we can get some animals to plow our fields for us. We use horses to ride around so that we don't have to walk with our own 2 feet. Humans are big fans of not doing work ourselves. In the modern day, we have washing machines and dishwashers and cars, all of these machines so that we don't have to do their purpose with our own energy. And the biggest, the ultimate example of offloading work in humanity came about 300 years ago with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. Why was the Industrial Revolution so special? Well, in about the 1700s, British people were beginning to run out of fuels. They had began to chop off all of the trees, so they were running out of lumber, fuel, and what did they turn to? They turned to coal. And coal was the key here. They could burn it for heat, just like they once burned wood for heat, but coal alone wasn't super useful. It got useful when a guy named James Watt came along and invented what transformed coal from a common heat or fuel source into a force for change in humanity. He invented the steam engine, and a quick overview of how the steam engine works would be that you take some coal down here and you burn it, and it releases heat, and that heat goes up to some water and turns the water into steam. The hot steam rises, and above is a turbine, which that steam pushes, and the turbine rotates. And the rotating turbine can then do work. And the key is turning the heat into movement. Once people could turn coal into movement and action, the opportunities became endless. You could now run a train with a steam engine. Instead of people having to walk from place to place, you could use the power of coal to get them there. Instead of thinking for themselves, in the 20th century, humans invented computers, objects that could think for them. Coal and energy in general, the next step past the steam engine being electricity, this took off and made so many incredible options for innovators. The Industrial Revolution was incredibly important. You can see just how important it was to Britain. I have a quote here that when the British attached a steam engine to their cotton looms, they could easily outproduce India, up until then the world's leading producer of cotton cloth. This is from Cynthia Stokes Brown, another big historian, in her article When Everything Changed, the Industrial Revolution. This is talking about how before you would get cotton and you would string it up on a loom and you'd get a team of manual laborers. They would turn the cotton on the loom. But now you could use this steam engine to do the work for you. Just as you could apply it to a train, the British, whose cotton production was not the best before, they outproduced the top player very quickly with the cotton loom. Now, with such an important innovation, the British guarded their secret, but soon the rest of the world knew about it too. In 1860, the United States fought what many consider to be the first industrial war. Each side of the Civil War, United States Civil War, each side manufactured, mass-produced their equipment, their artillery, their firearms, and their clothes. They mass-produced them in factories that all ran because of coal and because of James Watts's steam engine. This was the beginning of how change began to accelerate. And human ingenuity itself is way more useful when you have near infinite manpower to back it up. There is a fundamental property of knowledge and learning where if you start with a little bit of knowledge, represented here by this orange bubble, eventually someone will come along and turn that into more knowledge, this green bubble. But this first bit of knowledge doesn't die out. It continues to be helpful. So when even more people come along and create even more knowledge, you start seeing that this orange piece continues creating knowledge. And it's not a perfect cycle like this, by all means, but you get the idea. Knowledge expands faster with more knowledge. It can be summed up with knowledge creates knowledge. And this is doubly true when there is manpower to back it up. Manpower meaning coal power or electricity power. Although this phenomenon of acceleration in the creation of knowledge has been in place for thousands of years, the advent of coal and the ability to apply this human ingenuity in practical ways took off, and the world's population, for example, exploded. If we have a quick look here at this graph, I have marked in green an important point. Notice here in green, well, the yellow doesn't show up that well. I'll do it in red. Notice here, what point does the world population start to really pick up? About the point when coal and these energy sources became widely available. And what happens when there are more and more people to access and build on the library of knowledge that our ancestors have created? Well, you see that change accelerates even faster. So we see that the acceleration of change is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not only does change accelerate itself through the creation of knowledge that knowledge itself spurs, but we have this offloading work to other substances or means that mean that humans can practically do more now than we ever could before. No human 1,000 years ago could have dreamed of putting a metal bird in the air and using it to fly across an ocean in 10 hours. That wasn't a thing. And so change accelerates not only because of this intrinsic property of knowledge and of learning, but because of the discovery and the usefulness of fossil fuels in turning this ingenuity and this human desire to create knowledge and use knowledge, turning that into something that could help humans and help humans grow. I have one last quote to end on here, which is, "Today, human activity is connected in a simultaneous global network never before attained on Earth. An exchange network that includes medicines, foods, and weapons. Never before have there been so many people on Earth, and with such a diverse and large exchange network. We know what happens when an exchange network grows. As the network and its diversity grows, the opportunities that it offers grows. And that's why change accelerated ultimately is because of the feedback loop. That knowledge creates knowledge, that coal contributed to that feedback loop. But again, as change accelerated more. And that is the ultimate reason that we see this explosion of activity in the recent years.